Let's talk more about the relationship between the EU and Ukraine. I'm joined by Shea. He's the former NATO Deputy Assistant Secretary General for Emerging Security Challenges. Jamie, European Union leaders really kind of doing a delicate dance, aren't they? I mean, they want to push Kyiv to make changes to meet the EU standards for governments, but they also don't want to make any guarantees that they would allow fast-track membership to the EU. Zelensky would like that. Give me your take on where we see things.
Good evening, Mike. Yes, it's going to be, unfortunately, for the next years, a kind of glass half full, half empty scenario. Ukraine will continue to be frustrated that it can't start immediately negotiating formally to join the EU, and the EU won't set a date to start those negotiations. President Zelensky would like, obviously with the sympathy that Europeans feel for Ukraine at the moment, to fast-track the whole affair. But the most recent member of the EU, Croatia, took well over 10 years to join, and of course was not going through a devastating war with Russia at the time. In fact, the EU managed to do something quite impressive last June in agreeing to offer Ukraine a formal candidate status, which was something that was quite contentious in the EU before then. So the EU already sees that as quite a big step forward. But of course, Ukraine has to get through the war first, and we have no idea how that's going to go on for. Then it has to recover. But on the other hand, and we could talk about this if there's time, what the EU is doing as an olive branch to Ukraine is saying, okay, but we're not going to do what we did in the past and wait till you actually join and then offer you all of the benefits of membership. We're going to start sort of, front loading some of those benefits to you right away. So you'll feel the good effects of being closer to Brussels, and that will keep you warm while you're waiting for, realistically, a date for membership. But that is far off into the future. It could take as long as 20 years.
And something that's happening immediately, though, is, and I want to get your thoughts on this, these government pledges of more tanks coming from Germany, other Western nations, including the United States. Give us your take on these moves of late.
Well, it's certainly impressive that after Germany was hesitating about delivering the Leopard 2s, having sort of crossed the Rubicon and decided to deliver them, it's followed up very quickly by offering Ukraine a sizable number of the Leopard 1 tanks. These are not used by the German army any longer, so the Germans, therefore, could theoretically transfer them quite quickly. They're 1960s tanks, but they've been very effective, and some of them will require to be upgraded. And so this German move, of course, also encourages many other countries around Europe at the moment to follow suit and see what they still have in their stocks that they can transfer. And there's been good news from Paris, by the way, Mike, also in recent days. The Ukrainian Defense Minister Reznikov has just been in Paris, where the French, who were quite hesitant at the beginning of the conflict, are now offering, more Caesar artillery systems and their top-of-the-range radar system too. Just on the EU side, the EU is not insignificant in this effort either. Your correspondent mentioned that they're stepping up the training funded by the EU of Ukrainian soldiers from 15,000 to 30,000, and so far they've used up most of their 5.5 billion so-called European peace facility to fund weapons deliveries to Kyiv, which is the first time in its history that the EU has ever been prepared to do this.
And so talking about all of that, the efforts by the EU, you mentioned France, Germany, all this new hardware being introduced to the theater there. We're also looking at Russia adding more troops. Are we looking at a much more prolonged conflict?
Well, possibly yes, particularly if neither side, when we get to the spring, is able to sort of carry out a decisive conflict-changing offensive, which would shift the balance of forces decisively and durably in its favor. The Russians, of course, will be trying to do this, as you mentioned, by restocking and by replenishing their depleted equipment. And, of course, the Ukrainians will be hoping that all of those tanks and artillery systems that we've been talking about, and they hope also, of course, F-16 aircraft from the United States will arrive in the next couple of weeks with the Ukrainian crews trained to operate them with sufficient ammunition, both to parry that Russian attack and then to go on the offensive themselves. But my sense is that if neither side really can take advantage of its if its assets in the spring, the Ukrainians, of course, with all of this new Western equipment, will it arrive in time? Will the Ukrainians know how to use it in a combined arms fashion to maximum effect? If the Russians are going to have to waste a massively more amounts of manpower and equipment. If neither side is able to prevail, they'll probably give up the offensive for some time to come, and we could go back to that sort of, stalemate, frozen conflict situation, Mike, that we knew in Ukraine between 2014 and 2022.
Jamie Shea, can't thank you enough for your analysis. Appreciate you taking time and visiting with us. Appreciate it.